Once a devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, what is selfishness? Bhagwan said, the world is not external. Because you identify yourself wrongly with the body, you see the world, its pain becomes apparent to you. But this is not real. Seek the reality and get rid of this unreal feeling. A disciple was once excited because someone in the town spoke deprecatingly of Sri Bhagwan. Maharishi said, I permit him to do so. Let him say even more. Let others follow suit. Only let them leave me alone. If anyone cares to believe all these scandalous words, I shall consider it a great service done to me, because if he persuades people to think I am a false Swami, they will no longer come to visit me, and then I shall be able to have a quiet life. I want to be left alone. Therefore, I welcome the libellous pamphlet. Patience, tolerance, more tolerance. Satisfaction can be only when you reach the source. Otherwise, restlessness is there. While reading a book, while your eyes follows the lines, your heart should be in the one. Devotee asked, my friend has ardor for social service, work even at the sacrifice of his own interests. Maharishi said, his selfless work is helpful, its utility cannot be denied. See how he works and remains there, and how you sent him the extract from the conversations. There is a link between the two. The work had further purified the man's mind. He gained an insight into the wisdom of sages rather readily. Social work has a place in the scheme of spiritual uplift. The work is social and not selfish. God is kept in view alone. The public good is identical with one's own good. Such activities of the mind and body purify the mind. Thus, good social work is a way to render the mind purer. Devotee asked, but social work doesn't give us leisure for meditation. Bhagwan said, of course, one's effort cannot end with social work. The outlook is always on the highest truth. Everything will come right in time. Hari Om Tat Sat. Devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, how is Mona possible while engaged in worldly transactions? Maharishi said, when women walk with water pots on their heads, they are able to talk with their companions, and all the while they are intent on the water above. Similarly, when a sage engages in activities, they do not disturb him because his mind abides in Brahm. The difficulty is that man thinks he is the doer. It is a mistake. It is the higher power which does everything, and man is only a tool. If he accepts that position, he is free from troubles. Otherwise, he courts them. I watched a visitor who was a famous public speaker for the Arya Samaj, a vigorous debater and fighter known for his intolerance, enter the hall and begin to question the Maharishi. Scarcely waiting for an answer, he began to provide the answers himself. He laid down the law in a loud voice. For instance, he said, I want to know the way to find truth. A minute later, he firmly said, the service of humanity is the best way to find truth. Maharishi replied, you say so. The man began to argue with two other presents in an obnoxious manner, and thereafter the Maharishi kept quiet and did not say a single word until the man left. After that, Maharishi said to us, silence is the greatest weapon wherewith to answer such persons. Do your work without anticipating fruits thereof. That is all that you should do. I asked Maharishi why his books are in poem and song. He said it is easier for people to learn and remember this form. In the West, it will only be those disgusted with material life who will turn to the path. Joy and pain are the attributes of the Ankara, ego. When, by Atma Vichara, you realize that you are not that sheath, where is the pleasure or pain for you? Your real nature transcends all such feelings as pleasure and pain. So, your benefit in Atma Vichara is tangible in the shape of escape from all the ills and sorrows of life. What more can one desire? He who is always stationed in the Atma may be in the midst of a crowd and will yet continue undisturbed. He has no need or desire for solitude. What people call Satan and devil, the black forces, etc., is simply ignorance of the true self. All aims, aspirations, desire to serve humanity, schemes to reform the world, cast them all upon the universal power God which sustains this universe. He is not a fool. He will do what is required. Do you lose the sense, I am doing this? Get rid of the egoism. Do not think you are the person to effect any reform. Leave these aims latent. Let God attend to them. Then, by getting rid of egoism, God may use you as an instrument to effect them. But the difference is that you will not be conscious of doing them. The infinite will be working through you, and there will be no self worship to spoil the work. Otherwise, there is desire for name or fame, and one serves the personal self rather than humanity. Nearly all mankind are more or less unhappy because nearly all do not know the true self. Real happiness abides in self knowledge alone, all else is fleeting. To know oneself is to be blissful always. Hari Om Tat Sat. Devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, is the world progressing now? Bhagwan said, there is one who governs the world, and it is his lookout to look after the world. He who has given life to the world knows how to look after it also. If we progress, the world progresses. As you are, so is the world. Without understanding the self, what is the use of understanding the world? Without self knowledge, the knowledge of the world is of no use. See the world through the eyes of your Supreme Self. Devotee asked, it is harder for Westerners to withdraw inwards. Maharishi said, yes, they are Rajasic, the energy going outwards. We must be inwardly quiet, not forgetting the self. Then externally we can go on with our action. Does a man who is acting on the stage in a female part forget that he is a man? Similarly, we too must play our parts on the stage of life, but we must not identify ourselves with those parts. You may carry on with your government work. You may continue to live the married life in the world as before. You may assume the stage which transcends all stages. Only do not forget the one. Keep your mind on that all the time, whatever you happen to be doing. Devotee asked, what is the best way of living? Maharishi said, it differs according to whether one is a jnani or not. A jnani doesn't find anything different or separate from the self. All are in the self. The universe and what is beyond are to be found in the self. Devotee asked, how to remove spiritual sloth of others? Maharishi said, have you removed your own? Turn your enquiries towards self search. The force set up within you will operate on others also. Devotee asked, what about PB's idea of inspired action? Maharishi said, Let activities go on, they do not affect the pure self. The difficulty is that man thinks he is the doer. It is a mistake. It is the higher power which does everything, and man is only a tool. If he accepts that position, he is free from troubles. Otherwise, he courts them. The sculptured figure on temple tower shows great strain, but the tower rests on earth and really supports the figure. So is the man who takes on himself the sense of. Once a devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi how is work to be done by an aspirant. Bhagwan said without identification as the actor. For instance, while in Paris, you did not intend visiting this place. You see how you are acting without your own intention to do so. Chapter 3, verse 4 of the Bhagavad Gita says that a man cannot remain without acting. The purpose of one's birth will be fulfilled by itself. Gradually, concentration will become pleasant and easy, and you will be in that state whether attending to business or whether you sit expressly for meditation. Business will be all the more easier for you when your mind is steadied and strengthened by concentration. Devotee asked, I have no interest in business, fearing my yoga practice will be marred. Bhagwan said, no, your viewpoint will change, as said in the Gita, chapter 2. You will regard business in the light of a mere dream, but that will not affect it, for you will go on attending to it as it were serious. Devotee asked, the difficulty is to be in the thoughtless state and attend to duties. Bhagwan said, let the thoughtless state be of itself. Do not think of it as pertaining to yourself. Just as when you walk, you take steps involuntarily, do so in your other actions. You now want to go elsewhere, and from there you will desire to go to some other place. At this rate, there could be no end to your travels. You do not realize that it is your mind that drives you in this manner. Control that first, and you will be happy wherever you are. It is my impression that Swami Vivekananda has somewhere narrated the story of a man trying to bury his shadow and finding that over every sod of earth he had put in the grave dug for burying his shadow, the later still appeared over the new earth, the shadow could never be buried. Similarly is the case of one trying to bury his thoughts. One must therefore attempt to get at the very bottom from which thought springs and root out thought, mind, and desires. Devotee asked, the quest for self is selfish. In a world of misery, selfless work is better. Bhagwan said, the sea is not aware of its wave. Similarly, the self is not aware of its ego. While the Maharishi was going down the hill, some sweepers were at their work. One of them stopped work and was about to prostrate before Maharishi. The latter said, to engage in your duty is the true namaskar. To perform one's duty carefully is the greatest service to God. There has been evil and sorrow since the beginning of creation. You ask why the rishis do not put matters right. The Vedas tell the asuras, demons, who existed since earliest times. There is a force of opposition in the world which produces strife and suffering, but it works to make man grow and evolve. It is a force in nature which coexists along with the good. Devotee asked how to correlate spiritual and worldly life. Bhagwan said there is only one experience. What are worldly experiences but those built up on the false I? To one who said the Bhagavad Gita preached Karma Yoga, the Maharishi replied, "No, because it taught that one should act with selfless motive. This could only be achieved after knowing the illusoriness of self, that is jnana. Hence, it really taught Jnana Yoga, which Maharishi said is the highest. He said that Gita taught man should act by letting the universal act through him. Hari Om Tat Sat. Once a devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, "Why is the world in ignorance?" Bhagwan said, "Let the world care for itself. If you are the body, there is the gross world. If you are the spirit, all is spirit only. Look for it, the ego vanishes. If you inquire, the ignorance will be found non existence. It is the mind which feels misery, darkness, etc. See the self." Devotee asked, "What is the purpose of all suffering and evil in the world?" Bhagwan said, "Your question is itself the outcome of the suffering. Sorrow makes a man think of God. Had it not been for the suffering, would you have put the question? Except for the Gyanis, every man from king to peasant has a certain amount of sorrow. Even in case where it seems absent, it is only a time factor that makes you think so. Sooner or later it comes. Also, one man may not question sorrow or God at the first blow, but he is likely to do so at the fifth blow. We have taken this vehicle in order to know our real state." Devotee asked, "But why should imperfection come from perfection?" Bhagwan said, "Had it not been for the manifestation of universe, we would not have thought about the real state. The purpose of the manifestation is for you to know the cause, why it is being done. There is no Maya when you know your real state. It is your fault if you do not know yourself." Devotee asked, "What is the difference between West and East?" Bhagwan said, "All have come to the same goal." Devotee asked, "I am a doctor, how to heal?" Bhagwan said, "The permanent cure is jnana. The patient must realize for himself. According to his maturity, he will realize it. Otherwise, if one disease goes, another comes in." To a young man who came and demanded to be given powers to stamp out the world's materialism, people who are unable themselves ask for divine powers to be utilized for human welfare. This is like the lame man who said he would overpower the enemy if only he were helped on his feet. The intention is good, but there is no sense of proportion. Devotee asked, "Is the world plan really good?" Bhagwan said, "It is indeed good. The error is on our part. When we correct that error, the whole scheme becomes good." Devotee asked, "How change world suffering?" Bhagwan said, "Realize the self, that is all that is necessary." Devotee asked, "The world is materialistic. What is the remedy for it?" Bhagwan said, "Material or spiritual according to your outlook. Make your outlook right. The Creator knows how to take care of His creation." Devotee asked, "How can I help others?" Bhagwan said, "What others is there for you to help? Who is the I that is to help others? First, clear that point and then everything settles itself." Hari Om Tat Sat. Devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, "There is widespread disaster in the world, that is, famine, pestilence, etc. What is the cause of this state of affairs?" Bhagwan said, "To whom does all this appear? You were not aware of the world and its suffering in your sleep. You are conscious of them only in your wakeful state. Continue in the state in which you were not aware of the world and its sufferings did not affect you. When you remain as the self as in sleep, the world and its sufferings will not affect you. Therefore, look within, seek the self, there will then be an end of the world and its miseries. Devotee asked, there are great men, public workers, who cannot solve the problem of the misery of world. Bhagavan said, they are ego-centered and hence the inability, if they remain in the self, they would be different. Devotee asked how to reconcile work with meditation. Bhagavan said, who is the worker? Let him who works ask the question. You are always the self, not the mind. It is the mind which raises these questions. Work always proceeds in the presence of the self. It is no hindrance to realization. It is the mistaken identity of the worker that troubles one. Get rid of the false identity. Everyday activities go on automatically. Know that the mind prompting them is but a phantom proceeding from the self. Why do you think that you are active? The activities are not your own, they are God's. Devotee asked, they say that the efforts will lead to blankness of mind and work will not be possible. Bhagavan said, go first to the blankness and tell me afterwards. Devotee asked, if one holds such self in remembrance, will one's action be always right? Bhagavan said, they ought to be. However, such a person is not concerned with the right or wrong of actions. His actions are God's and therefore right. Devotee asked, how can my mind be still if I have to use it more than other people? I want to go into solitude and renounce my headmaster's work. Bhagavan said, no, you may remain where you are and go on with work. What is the undercurrent which vivifies the mind, enables it to do all this work? Why the self? So that is the real source of your activity. Simply become aware of its doing your work and do not forget it. Contemplate in the background of your mind even whilst working. To do that, do not hurry. Take your own time. Keep the remembrance of real nature alive even whilst working and avoid haste which causes you to forget. Be deliberate. Practice meditation to still the mind and cause it to become aware of its true relationship to the self which supports it. He gave a simile about the spokes of a wheel, whether thin or thick, which are all within the same circle. So, all intellectual work is within the same circle of the self. Do not imagine it is you who are doing the work. Think that it is the underlying current which is doing it. Identify yourself with this current. If you work unhurriedly, recollectedly, your work or service need not be a hindrance. Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita really told Arjuna to be fixed in the self and act according to nature without the thought of doership. Then the result of actions would not affect him. Thus, inherence in the self is the sum of Gita's teaching. Even if interpreted as a duty and action, it means to act as tool of a higher power. Hari Om. Devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, is it useful to bring east and west closer? Bhagwan said such events will take place automatically. There is a power guiding the destinies of nations. These questions arise only when you have lost touch with reality. Devotee asks how to reconcile realization with wage earning activities. Bhagwan said actions are no cause of bondage. Bondage is only the false notion that I am acting. Leave off such thoughts, but let the body and senses play their role unimpeded by your interference. Devotee is work and obstruction. Bhagwan said no. For the realized man, there is no sense of being an agent. Even for an aspirant, he may practice self inquiry. While engaged in work, it may be difficult for a beginner, but after some practice, it will be effective and the work will not be a hindrance to meditation. Devotee asks how will transactions go on if one maintains mental silence? Bhagwan said when women walk with water pots on their heads and keep chatting with their companions, they are very careful of the lords of the heads. Similarly, when a jnani engages in activities, they do not defile him because his mind abides in Brahman. Devotee as we are men living in the world and have one kind of grief or another. We pray for help and still are not satisfied what to do. Bhagwan said, trust God. If you surrender, you must be able to abide by His will and not make grievance of what may not please you. Things may turn out different from what they are in appearance. Distress often leads man to faith in God. Devotee asked, I am a sinful man. Bhagwan said, why think of yourself so? You have rightly thrown all responsibilities on God, in whom you have faith, and He will look after that. Have compassionate love for others, but keep it secret. Don't show it and talk of it. If desires are fulfilled, don't be elated. If frustrated, don't be disappointed. The elation may be deceptive, it should be checked, for initial joy may end in final grief. After all, whatever happens, you are unaffected, still as you were. Devotee asked, but how can I help another with his problem, his troubles? Bhagwan said, what is the talk of another? There is only the one. Try to realize there is no I, no you, no he, only the one self, which is all. If you believe in the problem of another, you are believing in something outside the self. You will help him best by realizing the oneness of everything rather than by outward activity. The ego pertains to all the waking activities. The consciousness, the intellect, in deep sleep, where is the I? The intellect is still, the body is still, and yet the self is there. It is the waking activities that veil the real self by making ego. The false self appears as the real self. Everything in this universe is run by one supreme power, but if a man will not keep to the destined path appointed for him, but strays beyond its limits, then God punishes him, and through that suffering he turns towards the self. But when the punishment goes, he ceases to worship and again sins, thereby inviting an increased punishment. When he gets excited for anxious, he may know that he is not on the destined path but is straying, for on the appointed path he will be peaceful and content. He should abide in the self and not seek to stray into desires, ambitions, etc. beyond that God gives him, but be egoless. Whose free will is it? You believe it is yours. You are beyond will and fate. abide as that, and you transcend them both. That is the meaning of conquering destiny by will. Fate can be conquered. Fate is the result of karma, but by satsanga, the bad vasanas are conquered. His experiences are viewed in proper perspective. I am now enjoyer of karma's fruit. I was in the past and shall be in the future. Who is this I? Finding this I to be pure consciousness beyond karma and enjoyment, freedom and happiness are gained. There is then no effort, for the self is perfect and there is nothing to gain. So long as there is individuality, one is enjoyer and doer. But if it is lost, the divine will act and guide the course of events. Restrictions and discipline are for jivas and not for the muktas. Free will is implied in the scriptural injunctions to be good. It implies overcoming fate. It is done by jnana. As the fire which is kindled reduces all fuel to ashes, O Arjuna, so does the fire of knowledge reduce all works to ashes. When anything happens, we are prone to attribute the same to something or someone else. However, the fact is that our experiences have already been created by ourselves, and nothing happens which is more or less than what we deserve. What can others do to us? Others are not responsible for what happens to us. They are only instruments for what would happen to us some way or other. Let us be strong in faith and not succumb to fear. Whatever happens, happens according to our prarabdha. Let it exhaust itself. Evil intentions and evil actions will react themselves and not affect us simply because they desire it. One is required not to think of oneself, so why there be anxiety regarding others? Hari Om Tat Sat. Devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, if a soul dies in babyhood or childhood, it doesn't seem fair because it has not had enough experience of life to win realization. Bhagwan said, you do not know the child's viewpoint. Yours is simply of the intellect. We and our children are all from God and in God. God takes care of us and our children. Animals can think like human beings. We must not imagine they are senseless creatures. Some who have associated in contact with people can understand words and conversations. He pointed to cow and said he could think intelligently. Individual human beings have to suffer their karmas, but Ishvara manages to make the best of their karmas for his purpose. God manipulates the fruits of karma. He doesn't add or take away from it. The subconsciousness of man is a warehouse of good and bad karma. Ishvara chooses from this warehouse what he sees will best suit the spiritual evolution at the time of each man, whether pleasant or painful. Thus, there is nothing arbitrary. The realized man knows neither past, present, or future. He is above time, for he lives in the timeless self. What is that is born, not the true self. Once we are born into that is the final, that is the true and only birth, the spiritual birth. The others are but fleeting incarnations of the vasanas. If it were not for the body, we would not talk of the spirit being within us. We would be the true self. The illumined man will just watch and wait and see what happens. He lets things take their course. He resigns all to that absolute power which you can call God, karma, or what you like. There is no egoism in him, so be quiet. There is a shloka in Gita which says that he who acts without attachment to the senses and without egoism. The sense I am doing this, though he kills an enemy, doesn't make any karma. Similarly, such an illuminated one is free from all past karma and from all past vasanas. How can there be karma or vasanas when the I, the ego, which caused or causes them, has been destroyed? The illumined man doesn't plan for the future and takes not for thought. Why should he? There is no sense of I in him any longer. The infinite power which is able to do things directs him. Devotee asked, I want to go to Mount Kailash. Bhagwan said, one can see these places only if destined, not otherwise, but after seeing all, there will still remain more places unvisited, if not in this hemisphere, then in the other. Knowledge implies ignorance beyond what is known. Knowledge is always limited. Surrender and all will be well. Through Throw all the responsibility on God. Do not bear the burden. What can destiny do? If one surrenders to God, there will be no cause for anxiety. Nothing will affect you if protected by God. The sense of relief depends upon the proportionate to reliance on God or on self. Devotee asked, my work hinders me. Bhagwan said, if you have the right attitude, the kind of life you lead doesn't matter very much. Hari Om Tat Sat. Devotee asked Bhagwan Sri Ramana Maharishi, in this pure atmosphere, the path is easy, but in towns it is difficult. Bhagwan said, when you see the true self, is it not a pure atmosphere? Let the body think what it wishes. But why should you think so? Only if you can keep quiet without engaging in any other pursuits also, it is very good. If that cannot be done, what is the use of being quiet? So long as one is obliged to be active, let him not give up attempts to realize the self. Even if a realized man were to destroy many lives, no sin can touch that pure soul. So too Gita says, you are yourself the source of all your happiness, whatsoever it be, and not external things. Even when you imagine that some external object has given you the happiness, you are mistaken. What happened really is that unconsciously the object brought you back for a flash to yourself, borrowed the happiness and thus presented it to you. The happiness came as a shadow to you. Why not look to the source, to the self, and realize it? Devotee asked, I am possessed by fears of disease and death. Bhagwan said, who gets diseased? Do you get it? If you analyze what you are, you see that disease cannot affect you. What are you? Do you die? Can you die? Think of Atma, realize that. Devotee asked, I try, but it doesn't remain in the mind long. Bhagwan said, practice makes perfect. Devotee asked, meanwhile, Bhagwan said, meanwhile, there need not be suffering. Devotee asked, would the use of birth control appliances lead to immortality? Bhagwan said, you must go to root of things, find out the true cause of birth, and then strive that. Let that which is born control itself. To whom is this birth? There is an ancient verse which says, desires go on increasing and burning more fiercely as they are fed. So, the only effective control is to check the causes within, to check desires and thus become moral. Devotee are how to control lust, anger, etc. Bhagwan said, whose are these passions? Find out. If you remain as the self, there will be found nothing apart from the self, then there will be no need to control, etc. If a man's happiness is due to outer causes and external possessions, then a man devoid of possessions should have no happiness whatever. Does real experience show this? No. For in deep sleep, man is then devoid of all possessions, including his body, yet instead of being unhappy, he enjoys blissful release. Doesn't everyone desire to sleep soundly? Hence, happiness is not due to external causes, but to returning into the self. When the pure I, the reality is forgotten, all miseries crop up. When that is held fast, the miseries do not affect the person. Emergence from self has been the cause of all misery. A snake in ashram hall fell down from the roof at night when sleeping. Maharishi ordered the man to take a lantern to light its path to door and not to harm it, saying regarding the snakes which infested the place, we have come to their abode as guests, and so we have no business to molest them. Let us leave them in peace. Devotee R, what is your opinion about social reform? Bhagwan said, self reform automatically brings about social reform. Confine yourself to self reform. Social reform will take care of itself. In 1938, Maharishi said to Dr. Nambiar, who spoke to him about his maladies, Maharishi had bleeding piles. Then I am tired of this body. Devotee R, is a teacher needed? Bhagwan said, as in all physical and mental training, a competent teacher is sought, so in matters spiritual the same rule applies. Paul Bruton to himself, my writings often come unexpectedly to me and also disjointedly. Often a paragraph or sentence belonging to the end or middle of a writing would come to me before the earlier parts. Hari Om Tat Sat.